Once upon a time. Welcome to Australian Book Lovers, your destination for imagination.
A big warm welcome to everyone and a huge thank you for joining us for the Australian Book Lovers podcast. Our mission is to bring fabulous Australian and Indigenous literature that spans a whole range of genres to book lovers around the globe, as well as fantastic resources and information for passionate authors looking to write their next bestseller. I'm Veronica Strachan, aka V.E. Patton, fantasy, memoir and picture book writer, reader, and one of your co-founders and hosts for the episode today, episode number 53, coming to you from Wurundjeri country.
And I am Darren Kazanko, dystopian science fiction and horror author, avid reader, book lover, of course, and also one of your co-founders and hosts today for the Australian Book Lovers podcast, coming to you from Corner Country. And yes, episode number 53.
Number 53.
Woohoo!
Now, do you have any magic interpretation of number 53 for us?
Look, a little bit of research. 53 has quite an interesting meaning. Apparently, it reveals that the past should not worry or burden you. And 53 is a symbol or a sign that it is time to leave the past in the past and focus on your future, because the future holds a lot for you if you only believe and trust. And it's also important, so the 53 goes, that forgive all the people who have wronged you and forge ahead with the peace of mind that you so deserve. Quite a fitting meaning for number 50.
I was going to say that sounds very appropriate considering who we're talking about today and what he wrote about. Yeah. Yes,
absolutely. And the changes that I've gone through behind the scenes, I like the idea of just, leave the past in the past. Or, well, I don't leave the past in the past, but I'll shift my focus to the future. Because I think the past is always, you have to carry it with you because it has so many lessons.
And,
treasures.
I like that.
Yeah.
Pack it up and bring it to the future. Nice.
But I had a bit of a look to see how important or these important things that might have happened in Australia in 1953.
Okay.
Being that I'm really enjoying doing that and want to make it a regular thing. So did you know on the 20th of March in 1953, the Television Act is passed by Parliament, setting regulations for the broadcast of Television Australia. Although television transmission did not commence until 1956.
So I was going to say, it sounds a bit earlier than I
imagined. Yes, that's strange. I can't believe it was that late. I thought maybe I've got to have a look and see when TV started, I suppose.
No, I think it could have been 56 because isn't there always the memory of that guy saying, "And welcome to television"?
Oh, yeah, but I just thought the invention of TV was for what I'm hopeless when it comes to that stuff. But there you go. They were a rare representation of a Parliament actually sitting down and thinking about the future. And getting things ready for something that happened 3 years later. Now they just deal with stuff after it's happened and try and shift blame. But anyway, and on the 4th of December, speaking of ridiculous acts of government sometimes. Not on the 4th of December, but in 1953, the Korea War did end, and Australia obviously had soldiers in that war, so that was a good thing to happen. On the 4th of December, now this is a little discovery that possibly changed the face of Australia, or at least part of it. So oil is discovered in the Exmouth Gulf off the coast of Western Australia. So that obviously had economic repercustions that we probably still feel today. And now in 1953, in 1941, Prime Minister the RT Honourable Robert Menzies issued a press statement recommending the flying of the blue ensign as the national emblem. However, the Flags Act, which came in 1953, subsequently proclaimed the Australian blue ensign as the Australian national flag and the Australian red ensign as the flag for merchant ships registered in Australia. There was also an amendment to the Flags Act of 1953 that was actually passed in 1998 to ensure that the Australian national flag can only be changed with the agreement of the Australian people. So there we go. 1953 cemented a little bit more of the flag and its use. So interesting little bit of history there. Now,
did you say the ensign flag? Is that the flag, the Australian national flag, or is that the naval flag?
That's a good question because I just assumed. So it says proclaim the Australian blue ensign as the Australian national flag.
No, there you go.
Yeah, so with the magic of podcasting. So yes, with the magic of podcast and editing, that's as far as I can learn, you see. I'm a very good learner. No. So as I've discovered it, ensign is the national flag flown on a vessel to indicate nationality. So there we go. Yeah, so a little bit of ocean flag information.
Ocean flag. And of course,
regards.
the other wonderful thing that's, wonderful in many people's views is the Australian Aboriginal flag, which was designed by Harold Thomas, and we did spend some time trying to get permission to use it because we didn't want to use it unless it was appropriate, and we did get fantastic letter back from the Torres Strait Islander Commission to use their flag on the website. But the Aboriginal flag now has the ownership has now been vested in the Commonwealth by Harold Thomas, so that it's freely available for public use and can be used, without fear of permission and that kind of thing. Yeah. So that only happened
I like that. That's good.
Earlier this year, just in February this year. So, yeah, and if anybody from overseas doesn't know the Aboriginal flag, it is the top half is black, the bottom half is red, and it has a bright yellow circle in the middle. Yeah, so the black symbolises the Aboriginal people, the red symbolises the land, and the yellow is the sun.
Yeah, well, hopefully now that the flag will just appear more and more and become just an integral part of, of our identity, really. So. Yeah,
it was interesting. I heard somebody chatting the other day, I can't remember what I was watching, some interview or other, and they mentioned, so I heard from Rick Morton, who is the editor of Growing Up in Country Australia, a book that a friend of mine, Fiona White, has written a story about. There was a launch at the Woodend Library, and I went up and had a listen to that, and he was talking about his connection to country. Despite him being a white Australian, he grew up in Boona in country Queensland. And he said something like this on a stage, and Maree Gladushchenko, who's an Aboriginal author, I read a couple of her stories. She said, just own that. We want to share that, I guess, that connection to country, whether you are, white or whatever colour. Then yes, Aboriginal people have the centuries and centuries of connection, but embrace your own connection. So, yeah, there you go. That's good.
And I think at the end of the day, I like the idea of, the earth beneath our feet. It's a matter of a relationship that we build and share, as opposed to ownership. I know that's a bit what do they call idealistic, but at the end of the day,
I think you are absolutely
my
right.
bare feet touch the same beach sand, and I like to have a nice relationship with our little planet called Earth. So.
Yeah, we spent 2 years just a bit over 2 years in Western Australia, and look, I loved it over there. The weather was great and all those kind of things, but it just never quite felt like home. And coming back to Victoria, to where I grew up, it was like, home. And, the trees were the right shape and the earth was the right colour, and, it was rockier and our mountains were right. We had more, the temperate rainforest, we had tree ferns and those kind of things, and the bracken was different. So all of those was just that connection and that, the feeling of being home.
Tap, tap, tap. There's no place like home.
That's exactly right. So there you go. So we got a bit sidetracked with your... have you finished? What happened in...
I've got a couple of little more things.
Okay, bring it on.
So speaking of home, our home that we call Australia, in 1953, the population was 8,782,173. Mm-hmm. To put that in perspective, the same year... Just in New York alone, the population was 15.5 million. We are a tiny country as far as when it comes to the amount of people, and that still is today. I mean, the population of Australia will fit easily into just one city in a lot of the countries. But so there we go. We are a young country. But and here's a really cool part, or a bit of trivia. In 1953, David Warren of the Aeronautical Research Laboratories of Melbourne invented an ingenious device now installed in every international plane, which is, of course, the black box flight data recorder. What an invention! What just something that is still, something that's so important today.
Yeah,
and
I believe it's not black.
Whoa, yeah, but it's a black day if you need to open it, I suppose. I don't know why they
I've got a
call
feeling,
it a black box.
why do they call it a black box when I heard that, in fact, it's orange or something like that?
I have no idea. Maybe that's something we can look into. And,
Yes, another day.
Yeah, another day. But to finish it off with some music. So in 1953, a couple of top hits, and there was lots to choose from, but I thought these are quite thing. We've got coming up soon a talk with Kate Foster, so this will make sense when we do chat with her, which is a fantastic chat. But anyway, How Much Is That Doggy in the Window by Paddy Page was the number one hit in 1953 in Australia. And because we are Australian book lovers, another number one hit in 1953 by Frankie Lane and Jimmy Boyd was Tell Me a Story.
Ah, there you go.
And so there you go, a little bit of 53, episode 53. I'm so happy to be here. I'm so happy for everyone to be joining us. And that was a little snapshot of Australia in 1953.
Yes, and so we're getting closer. What are we going to do when we get to 2020? Oh, yeah, see, when we get to 2000. What are we up to? Episode 53.
Well, yeah, so when we got another 47 episodes to go. And then we'll start going to the 1800s.
Yes, okay.
So, yes, which will be very interesting. We're going back in time.
Very good.
And then maybe we can start discussing what we're, or we can go the other way and, being a bit of a sci-fi horror nut, we can talk about what we think the future of Australia is going to look like each year. So, but that'd be more of a creativity thing. But anyway,
yes.
So, yeah, episode 53. How about we jump into a little bit of news?
Okay, let's go. I have some news for authors from the Australian Society of Authors, and I think it's worth us considering. So this is one for all your authors out there. Take the National Author Survey. So the Australian Society of Authors says if you're a published author, we strongly encourage you to complete the National Author Survey. And it was launched on the 27th of April, 2022 by Macquarie University, the Australian Council for the Arts and the Copyright Agency. So the survey investigates the current experiences of Australian authors in the book industry and follows on from an earlier survey conducted in 2015, which, among other findings, reported that Australian authors earn on average $12,900 per annum from their creative practice, which is pretty sad.
I like to imagine that a lot of authors that hit markets and libraries and book as in hit the road with their books. Yeah. I like the idea that they're just keeping suitcases full of cash.
There's a little bit of cash under the counter stuff.
Yeah, I only made 10 grand. Well, why are you driving that Mercedes? Well,
and it is an average, and there are there's a bunch of writers who obviously do a bit more and a bunch who do a bit less. But yeah, it's not a great thing. But anyway. Their key findings on author income have been instrumental in forming and strengthening the advocacy reports of the ASA and book creators over the years. So the ASA enthusiastically supports the effort to update this data and urges all members to participate. So you can go on to the ASA website, which is ASAUTHORS, AS Authors, in fact, .org. Go to the news, or you'll see on their banners and things to take the National Author Survey. And it takes about 20 to 25 minutes. And there are 3 prizes of $1,000 each on offer to respondents. So you never know. You could be, in the running for one of those prizes of $1,000. And if you're only earning $12,000 a year, if you're an average earning author or less, this could be a good thing.
Definitely. And it is important to get that data. I mean, sure, winning $1,000 would be amazing, but that data is important. They do such a good job, and it helps us, like you said, it helps strengthen the industry moving forward.
Yeah, and advocacy and lobbying. So if we can say that, this is how many authors are out there, this is what they're reading, these are the things that are important to them, it really helps people in the lobbying sphere. And hey, who knows, we might have a new government in another month or so. Let's not talk about it. Let's move on to another Australian thing, which is my little foray into meanings and origins of Australian words and idioms. Yeah, so this is from the Australian National University School of Literature, Languages and Linguistics. So that's a nice alliteration for those of us who like those things. So I'm up to the letter U, and I thought it was very appropriate that we have Yui. So if I'd said we're having
of course,
doing
chucking
a
a
Yui.
Yui, of course. Without context, it's a weird word, and then of course it's not Yui, it's chucking a Yui. I think.
Chucking a Yui, that's it. Exactly. So it's a U-turn for anybody who's not sure.
Go down there, chuck a Yui, right?
Yeah, exactly. So formed by abbreviating U-turn, and then you add a Y on the end, which is a common Australian way, of course, of ending, or altering words, and often found in the phrases to chuck a Yui or do a Yui. So there you go, to carry out a U-turn. Now, the earliest evidence of the term is found in 1973. So there you go.
Ooh.
It's not that long ago. So,
No.
Yeah, interesting. All right, I've got another U word for you. And again, it's a fairly common one, a ute.
Well, yes. I don't know, is that an Australian?
Well, yeah.
I suppose the Americans always call it a utility, do they?
Utility or a
truck.
Truck, yeah. Anyway, so of course a ute is the abbreviation of utility, which is a small truck with two-door cab that looks like a sedan and a tray with permanent sides that's part of the body. The word ute is first recorded in 1943.
Oh, wow.
Familiar sight on Australian roads, both rural and urban. And of course, many towns have an annual gathering of utes for competitive display, sometimes called a ute muster, with prizes awarded in categories such as the best street ute and the best feral ute.
It's funny you say that. We've got here, Mount Compass, a beautiful part of the Fleuro. They have the Mount Compass Cup, which is a cow race.
Right.
And as part of the day's festival is a like a ute procession, so everybody gets their hotted up utes or whatever so you got like an hour of utes just cruising around as well. So very Australian. The cow race, that's an interesting one, but we'll touch on that another day.
There you go. All right, I think I'll leave you with the Yui and the ute.
I am a little bit disappointed, to be honest, Veronica.
Why?
Because, whether it's Australian, I always thought it was. What about the word Ugg?
Well, Ugg boot is there. That was my third one. So,
I thought you'd finished.
Well, I have, but it is there on the page. I wasn't going to tell you everything else.
I'd love to know about Ugg boot because we're going backwards in the alphabet, obviously. So, next episode, Ugg will be gone, and we'll never get to visit him again.
All right. So, a flat sole boot made from sheepskin with the wool on the inside. So, the term is of unknown origin, but perhaps originally an alteration of ugly boot. So they're Australia's favourite footwear, of course, for comfort or cold weather. The early evidence for the term from the late 1960s suggests they first became popular with surfers. The name Ugg Boots, UGH Boots, was registered as a proprietary name for a type of footwear in 1971 by the Shane Clothing Company. But in 2006, Ugg Boot, UGG, and its variants, was removed from the Australian Register of Trademark. It's now a generic term for this type of boot in Australia. And for discussion of this, you can go to Footwear in Australia. But yes, you can...
Well, and then recently an Australian company was not allowed to use the term.
That's exactly right, because
the American style.
There's an American style have tried to snaffle that as well. But
yes.
The Uggs are still about.
Well,
Uggs and the Mockies, but I haven't got to M yet, so you have to wait till I get there.
Well, the Uggs will forever be a beautiful and not ugly. They're a beautiful footwear, fashionable, comfortable, warm. Yeah.
Well, I'm going to admit that I have never owned a pair of Uggs.
What?
How about that?
Oh, no. So every day you've never got to 100% happiness.
No.
Only 99.
Life has been a miserable shadow of what it could be.
This is what you need to do after the recording.
Dash out and get a pair of Ugg Boots, yeah.
Yes. It's like happiness for your feet. Especially because, unless it's really cold, well, of course, when you're going to put Ugg boots on, but otherwise, I don't know. I'm just a fan of thongs. I don't like wearing shoes unless I have to. So to go from cool breeze in my thongs to suddenly not warm and like super cloud comfy, it's quite a transition. I recommend it.
Oh, very good. All right, so that is my news. A little bit of meanings and origins, and a little bit of please do the National Author Survey.
Excellent.
What have you got for our listeners today?
Certainly, I would just like to let our listeners know some of the fantastic new listings on the Australian Book Lovers website.
Yep.
So the first one it's called The Rockins Familia, and that's by awesome author Nikky.
I went to the launch. It was really good.
Well, The Rockins Familia can be found under our fantasy genre. And so it reads as follows. An orphan bent on revenge. A monster searching for freedom, a forbidden pact that binds their fates together. Lise has heard her father's screams, smelled the iron tang of his blood. She's witnessed his execution and plotted her revenge. Then a violent encounter traps Lise in a blood pact with a Rarkyn from the other world and imbues her with the monster's forbidden magic, a magic that will erode her sanity. To break the pact, she and the Rarkyn must journey to the heart of the Empire. All that stands in their way are mountains and the Empire's soldiers, and each other. But horror awaits them on the road. Horror's even Rarkyn's fear. The most terrifying monster isn't the one Lise travels with, it's the one that's awoken inside her. So that is The Rockins Familia by Nikky under our fantasy genre.
Woohoo! I am about 1/3 of the way through it, and really enjoying it. It's just like, as you said, it has all the great things: monsters, magic, baddies, great adventure, a quest, all those things. But Nikky writes really fantastic work. So hopefully I'll have a review maybe for the next episode, not for this episode because we're going to be done. But and I'd love to get Nikky on for a chat. So I must
that would be awesome.
Give her a little nudge.
So Nikky, if you're listening, come and have a chat, please.
Look, she's chatting all over the place to various people with the Rockins Familia just being launched. And she did a great launch. She did a Zoom launch because she's she's an Australian. She's currently lives in New Zealand, and she had some great games, and we did some really good science fiction history things, challenges that we had to do. So it was good fun. It was really good.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Sounds like I missed out on a party again. Now, the next awesome title that's been listed it's actually an anthology. The book is called Weaving Words, Women About Women. And this can be found under our contemporary genre. So Weaving Words is an anthology of diverse short stories written by women about women. It emerged through the collaboration of 8 passionate writers who got together to share ideas, offer advice, and give each other support. Their passion and creativity fueled their efforts and culminated in a book filled with unique and fascinating tales, as varied as the authors themselves. This eclectic collection spans a range of genres from murder to travel, from comedy to mysticism. That's always a tongue twister. Yeah. But that is Weaving Words, Women About Women, under our contemporary genre. Now, as far as the authors are concerned, that they include Maree Walk, Maria Issaris, Adelaide Hunter, what a cool name that is. Now, Irina Gladushchenko, I hope I pronounced that right, Joanna Makris, Conchita Garsantiago, and a very favourite author of ours, Maria P. Frino.
Yay. Good on you, Maria.
Yes, absolutely. So if you're looking
a great supporter of ours and listens to the podcast and is a very good supporter of all things Aussie literature. So, good to see your anthology there.
Yeah, always writing, Maria. So she's had a few releases, and this is another one that she's been part of. And look, so if an anthology is something you love, then definitely Weaving Words, Women About Women is worth definitely a look and a purchase. So jump onto that, have a look. Now, a little bit more up my alley is a book called Tasmanian Gothic by Mikhaeyla Kopievsky. And you can find this under the science fiction. This one's got a really striking cover. I love it. But Tasmanian Gothic is a grim, dark biopunk thriller set in a decaying urban environment and lush mutant wilderness. So Solari wasn't alive when the ozone layer split like a gutted fish above Tasmania and spilled radiation over the edge of the stratosphere, but she's living with the consequences, the mutations, the gangland war, and the border wall that divides the affluent north from the contaminated south. Orphaned and alone in the southern reaches, Solari survives the chaos the only way she knows how, cooking the wildly addictive snow rock for local crime lord, and now I'm going to try and pronounce this, Warshulots, let's say Warshulots, for the local crime lord Warshulots, and avoiding the mutants that skulk in the city's shadows. Now, that is Tasmanian Gothic by Mikhaeyla Kopievsky under our science fiction. Now, very interesting author, because if our readers haven't had a bit of a look, it might be interesting to note that she's a former counter-terrorism advisor and has travelled to and worked in Asia, the Middle East and Africa. So if she brings any of that history to her science fiction story set in a divided Tasmania, which is very intriguing, that will be a really cool read. Absolutely.
Yeah, I've read her... the first book of her Divided Elements series. It is part of the self-published science fiction competition that I'm still, as you know, working through, and it was fantastic. I really enjoyed it. So I suspect, and I've got the others on my to be read list, so I suspect this will be just as good. Fantastic author, yeah, really good. And awesome. Tasmanian Gothic, you might remember that when we talked episodes and episodes ago about the various genres and those kind of things, about all the science fiction and fantasy and all the various subgenres, that Tasmanian Gothic came up as being a whole thing. So Mikhaeyla's jumped in and is giving us a story.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So the next book I would like to let you know about, of course listed on the website, is called A Remarkable Woman, and this is by author Jules Van Mil. You can find that under our Kissing Koala romance section. So A Remarkable Woman reads as follows. French woman Avril Montdidier leaves the tragedies of World War II and an apprenticeship at Dior in Paris to emigrate to Australia. She arrives with a suitcase and a dream to start her own fashion business. She is settling into Melbourne when an event in her personal life forces her to flee to a cattle station in southern Queensland to work as a nanny. It is a sweeping saga of city and country, a family dynasty, love, heartbreak and fashion from an exciting new voice in commercial women's fiction. So that was A Remarkable Woman by Jules Van Mil. So again, we can find that under our romance section.
Very good. And we've been lucky enough to get an ARC copy of Jules's book, and that has gone to one of our very small group of ARC readers. So Emily Rayburn is currently reading that for us, and hopefully we'll be able to have a chat to Emily once she's had a chance to finish it and hear what she thought of A Remarkable Woman.
Yes, definitely. So that's just a few of the new additions to the website. If you are an author listening to the podcast today or tomorrow or whenever in the future, obviously you can't be listening to it in the past, please jump.
I don't know. We have a bit of portal fiction here, a bit of time travel.
Yes, that's true. But no, if you are an Australian author and you would like to put your book on our website for listing, so to try and get more eyes and book lovers to see it, of course, jump onto AustralianBookLovers.com, click on the page that is for authors, and all the information's there too. It's very easy to submit your listing, and we'll be happy to put it on free of charge, of course. The main thing is we just want the world to discover the wonderful talent we have here in Australia, and that is my news
to read
for episode
more
53.
Aussie books.
Yes, absolutely. So I think now it's time to talk about today's wonderful guest.
Tell us all about it.
Well, we are going to be talking, I'll be talking with Mr. Jake O'Donnell. He's the author of Walk Like a Maniac, and that is the story of everyone who became a man in the 21st century. So very, very cool premise, and it was a fun chat, absolutely. So, but for the readers and audio listeners out there, the book is Walk Like a Maniac, and as Jake O'Donnell puts it, if men really are from Mars, then it's no surprise that it is a cold, barren wasteland devoid of life. But while modern men still don't know who let the dogs out or whether Shaggy did in fact do all those things, they have at least tried their best, or at the very least been present, in a century that has fought for equal rights while also giving them equal lefts, directly to the tune. Following the journey of the modern man through the seminal first-time moments of his life, Walk Like a Maniac provides an up-close and personal look at the embarrassing, ridiculous, mistake-ridden and underwhelming journey that all boys have to take on their way to becoming a man in the 21st century. As self-deprecating as it is insightful, Walk Like a Maniac not only examines the universal experiences that define the modern man, but also explores a hilariously detailed personal account of the journey. After all, what better way to really examine the psyche of 21st century men than through the eyes of someone who encapsulates everything it means to be one in all its bracket limited, unbracket, glory and shame. So Walk Like a Maniac, the story of everyone who became a man in the 21st century, actually reached #1 on Amazon bestsellers list for adult humour within the first month. So
Very
really
good.
cool.
Congratulations, Jake.
Absolutely. So really cool conversation. He is a man of many talents, a man of many stories, and let's just jump into it because I think, listeners, you're going to have a great time.
Sounds good.
So awesome, book lovers out there. Today's very special guest was kind enough to admit that he can't swim, sing, or properly ride a bike. He's never paid for a haircut that he's been happy with. Now, he has, however, spent a night in a dumpster, sliced his chest open sliding across the dance floor, played a game of cricket in a French hostel lobby, had a senile old man blast diarrhea next to his car, and has been sent home from the hairdressers for having dirty hair. Now, apart from occasionally wearing salad dressing for aftershave and drinking beer out of ashtrays, you have described yourself as a pretty decent bloke. And I'm obviously reading here not to bring up any information or chat about dead hermit crabs. But nonetheless, Mr. Jake O'Donnell, thank you so much for being part of the Australian Book Lovers podcast today. Welcome aboard.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Now, obviously, one of the reasons we've got you here is to chat about your fantastic debut book, Walk Like... Now, I tried to talk about this title on one of our previous episodes, so I'm glad you're on today, because I'd love to know the correct pronunciation, sorry. So is it Walk Like a Maniac, Walk Like a Maniac, or is it Walk Like a Man, EAC? The story of everyone...
Walk Like a Maniac is the one that I tend to run with, but Walk Like a Maniac works pretty well as well. So, but yeah, I tend to run with Walk Like a Maniac.
Lovely, lovely. Now, I guess the first thing we're obviously going to delve into all about the book and the reflections that it promises to bring. But I guess one of the first things I'd like to open up our conversation with is, you know, what was the inspiration of the book? But not only that, what was the tipping point when it went from perhaps a concept in the back of your mind to actually that physical, right, it's happening, and putting the book together?
Yeah, so I guess the inspiration for writing the book, I'll start with that one first, was I noticed just in the book world that there's not a lot of material out there that's catered directly to like a young male audience. So I noticed a pretty big gap in the market for that.
Okay.
Which my writing tends to tip into directly. So that was one sort of inspiration for writing the book. Another inspiration was obviously, you know, the last couple of years, the world's changed a little bit. Comedy's become a little bit more controversial, I guess. So I wanted to be able to touch on, I guess, just some of the more subjects that have become taboo over the last couple of years, and do it in a warm way that was, I guess, just in a warm way and in a respectful way as well, but with a sense of humility. In terms of coming up with the idea, the tipping point from when I was just sort of floating around in my head to getting it down on paper, was a pretty quick process, actually. So I'd been doing a bit of writing previously anyway. And then, just one day I came up with the idea that my style of writing tended to be sort of personal, anecdotal stories from my life, which is my preferred style of writing, I guess. I like writing about myself, funny stories. But I realized that, if I wanted to write a book just about myself, I'm not a celebrity. I'm not someone that people necessarily know. So it might not be, much of an appealing get for people, I suppose. So I came up with the idea of making about men in general. And pretty much from, day one, I came up with the idea of the book, came up with the front cover design, came up with the format, the way that I wanted to have the chapters set out, and I just got stuck into it. So it was a pretty quick process, actually.
Wow, so it sounds like you're pretty hyper-focused once you decided to do it.
Yeah, so I had a lot of other things going on, in life at the time as well. So, I wasn't able to put, time into it immediately all the time. Sometimes I'd have, maybe a couple of months where I wasn't able to get much writing done at all. But I was always, jotting things down, coming up with ideas throughout that whole process.
I understand the book is basically a reflection on the journey, I guess what it is to be, taking that journey from boy to a man in the 21st century. And so what I'd love to hear is your thoughts on what you might feel are some of the, really stark contrasts between, say, growing up from beyond the year 2000, say, versus the 70s, 80s and 90s, because I guess there's probably a couple of obvious ones, but when you contemplated the book and when you dived into it and put it together, did you find any sort of themes emerging that you were surprised when it comes to that difference between growing up in the 21st century versus, the 20th century in the 80s and 90s?
Well, I guess, one of the most obvious differences would just be that, life, well, at least, looking back, it seemed like it was simpler back then. I think life's become a little bit more complex and complicated. And with that, there's been things that pop up that maybe we weren't necessarily prepared for. Obviously, we weren't evolved to be able to deal with the new technological era. So I think that's thrown a couple of curveballs our way. But I guess one of the common themes that, popped up throughout the book is more just, the ridiculous way in which we've responded to, a lot of these challenges rather than the challenges themselves.
Yeah, I think that is quite a strong theme. And because I remember chatting with friends, I think I brought this up on a podcast before, if I could zip back in time to, say, the early 80s, and if a teacher said to me, look, you're going to have this fantastic device in your pocket in the future, and you're going to be able to talk to anyone around the world, you're going to be able to see videos, access any information you want, all the things that we take for granted today. How do you think society is going to change, or what impact do you think it might have on society? And I probably would have, tried to come up with many very wise philosophical forecasts and also, lots of fun stuff. But the irony is I never would have picked willy picks, to use the term, the common term. Do you know what I mean? It's literally become this device of just, an online social extravaganza of just craziness. And that's not something that I would have picked. And I don't know if it's easy for me to stand now as an adult and sort of say, oh, there's no way I'd want to go through that journey of becoming a boy to a man in today's, surroundings. But then again, I'm sure every generation says that when they look forward to what the new generations are. But it would be a very, very different process of growing up. So do you think also means that we've got different men emerging?
Yeah, I think so. I think also, as you mentioned, the willy pics being a predominant theme that people tend to use their phones for these days. I think that probably gives a bit of insight just into human nature in general, actually. We like to think that, we probably use these devices for really important things, but the reality is that we just use them for, really small, gratifying experiences, I guess. I think, we would almost certainly be having different men emerging now that we have in the past, just because the world's so different. There's, completely different challenges that they're dealing with, completely different social pressures, completely different social contexts. So I think it's only natural to expect that, we're going to get there's going to be a contrast between the men of yesterday and the men of tomorrow, I guess.
And where do you see yourself in this this emerging sort of change? Would you say you're a little bit more rooted into that 80s and 90s style of growing and the trials and tribulations of going through that growth period? Or would you say you fit a little bit more into the 21st century style?
Yeah, so I probably fit into the category of, that generation that went through, you know, the first half of my childhood was the 90s, and then the second half was the 2000s. So my childhood was basically that real sudden transformation from, you know, in the 21st century that we've witnessed. So yeah, I've kind of been a part of that generation that witnessed, you know, both worlds, essentially, the old world and the new world. So I felt like that positioned me perfectly to be able to make some observations about what it is to become a man in the 21st century.
Whoa. And obviously you made an important point that it's you tried to be very warm with the approach and you know, obviously focus on a lot of the humor of what can be a difficult journey, an awkward journey. So, but before we get to some of the fun stuff, I did want to touch on something that you mentioned in your book description, and that is that, you know, this current century is working hard to, you know, striving for equal rights for us all, but whilst also, you know, striking men in the chin, so to speak. So when it comes to, you know, those sort of proverbial punches that are being thrown our way, what would you say would be some of the main ones that we could all identify quite easily, or at least relate to?
Well, I guess, you know, the social contexts are probably the most obvious one. You know, like I've just touched on before, social contexts have changed, you know, pretty dramatically in the last sort of 10 to 20 years, but there's still a lot of common themes that have just been the same forever, particularly, you know, as a young male, as a part of a, you know, a male social group, there's certain dynamics that I think a lot of us would be able to relate to, certain, you know, peer pressure and things like that. And yeah, I think that's probably a theme that we're all able to, you know, reflect on in our own lives, and that's something that everyone can sort of relate to, I guess.
You know, I think it, for me, when I read that little description, or that observation, should I say, I did have a quiet think about that, and I thought, I wonder, you know, what are some of the new issues that are sort of slapping us in the face, what in a time when everyone's supposed to be getting along better than ever. And I think, you know, one of those is this huge dichotomy between, like I said, this tool we've got in our pocket that we can access all the information in the world, and most people just tend to be sticking down their pants and taking a photo. Now, so you've got that sort of R-rated, extreme, no rules aspect of the social life as well as online, but at the same time, the actual perceived, the perception that we want people to think of our culture and society is becoming even more G-rated. And I think that sort of goes to a little bit to what you were saying about comedy as well, being it's getting a little bit more difficult to traverse those waters without offending somebody. So I think I find it quite schizophrenic to be in a society where on one hand, there's the extreme of everything happening, but on the other hand, they want us to do the opposite of the extreme. For me, if I was to be growing up, I mean, it's difficult enough living in it, but to be sort of maturing in those times, it'd be one hell of a balancing act.
Yeah, definitely. I know for me personally, maybe you're the same. I'm sure some of the listeners would probably feel this way as well. Like, I made plenty of mistakes when I was young. I was pretty reckless at times, pretty cavalier. So I think, you know, with the way that everything's now just out there, everything that you do almost, I'm pretty glad that, you know, most of my childhood was in the 90s and early 2000s before this new wave of social media, I guess, because as we've seen, you know, particularly young males tend to find themselves in a bit of trouble at times, sticking their phone down their pants and, you know, other things that they tend to be doing with their phone, getting themselves into trouble. So, yeah, I think, yeah, I'm pretty grateful to have been sort of at least half before the 21st century in my childhood growing up.
Yeah, I agree. And I do make a bit of a joke about that. And I'm sure that's not the general description of a male on the planet Earth is not something, it's not defined what they do, you know, taking photos of. But as far as that device, though, I think you're right. When I grew up, of course, there was no chance of every little antic or mistake or stupidity. And believe me, there was a lot of it. I am eternally grateful that there's no video footage except for, you know, odd snippet here and there on that's been transferred from VHS or, you know, but I can't imagine what it'd be like to have so much of, you know, because so many of the mistakes we make is while we're finding our way in the world. And it helps shape who we are, but it's definitely not a reflection of who we are. And a lot of those mistakes, you know, you'd never want to do again. But I'd hate the idea to be permanently out there for everyone, for the world to see and for everyone to be sharing it. And so I definitely think that's one of the big differences between, you know, coming of age in, say, the 70s, 80s and 90s versus today, where everything you do has potential to be recorded. It must be such a challenge for so many young people out there.
Yeah, definitely. And a lot of those experiences are important ones. Like you said, you know, they're important for our development. We learn from them. And, you know, with the fact that, like you mentioned as well, like VHS, you'd be hard pressed to find a video player these days. So, you know, even if you've got the tapes lying around somewhere, it'd be pretty difficult to watch. Whereas now everything's digital, it's out there. Once it's out there forever as well. So, you know, a lot of the mistakes that we were able to make, you know, they happened, we're able to move on and they're in the past. Whereas, you know, these days, that might not be the case. You almost have to be a lot more careful about, you know, what mistakes that you can make, even though those mistakes tend to be pretty important for who we become as we grow up.
Yeah, yeah. And I know that I listened to an interview you did recently, and you mentioned that you lived for a while in Coolangatta on the Gold Coast there, on northern New South Wales. So I also spent quite a few years on the Gold Coast as well, and you know, was absolutely a time of doing naughty things, having lots of fun, and
that's Gold Coast for you, isn't it?
That is indeed. And you know, so that was, I moved there just before the year 2000. So probably still not running around with phones with cameras back then, filming everything and sharing. I was hoping back then.
You might have been able to get away with a bit more back then.
Yes, absolutely. And prior to that, you know, it was band days and time on stage and all those antics. But I'm just wondering, you know, do you think it's still today, with all those that ability to film everything and having that risk of stuff that you don't want the world to know about coming out? And, you know, when you're putting the book together, I'm not sure if you spoke with other guys or, you know, youths or whatever, but is it, I'm guessing it's still pretty much an unofficial rite of passage to sort of go crazy in your late teens, early 20s without, and throwing all caution to the wind. Or do you think that this digital landscape is taking away or softening that approach to where you go crazy for a few years and literally, you know, make them learn from all those stupid mistakes that we all have made so many of?
I think people still tend to go pretty crazy in their late teens and early 20s. I think that's just, you know, the way that people are wired, particularly young men. You know, we can't really help ourselves, I don't think. I think with, as you mentioned, with, you know, the whole phone thing in terms of, you know, being young and going out, and I guess one change that, you know, you tend to notice is that when we were doing that, it was very much in the moment. You know, you didn't worry about, you know, trying to get a photo of everyone. You were there, you were enjoying what you were doing. Whereas now, I think you mentioned earlier as well about, you know, the way that people present themselves on social media. I think a big part of it now is, you know, making sure they capture, you know, moments that they want people to see, rather than just being in those moments and enjoying them for what they are.
Yeah, that's a really good and interesting point. And I wonder for how many people, you know, because we're talking obviously about the journey from boy to man. So there's so many special moments in that journey that are just so important. And to be somehow not enjoying every ounce of that moment because you're already trying to perceive what other people are going to perceive it as, and therefore almost stage some of those what should be integral moments in time. Yeah, that's a very interesting little thought bubble there to ponder.
Yeah, I think it probably takes a little bit of the authenticity out of it as well. And I guess that takes away from, you know, how special a lot of those moments are.
Yeah. Well, I guess that's, we could call it the age of filters, because whether it be our psychologically, we're putting filters on and for the perception of what we're doing, and right down to the physical, you know, filters on photos to make things look different to.
Yeah, definitely. That's a really good point you make, actually.
That change, you know, I think, you know, when I was growing up, you know, and I guess we're sort of centralizing a bit of our talk on the phone at the moment, but it's such a powerful tool out there now. You know, everyone's glued to it. If you walk out without your phone, you're sort of lost. But one thing I thought about today, and I've thought about before, that I think is missing today is, you know, that rush, that fear, that anxiety that came from if you liked a girl and you wanted to give them a call, and perhaps, you know, if you could build that courage up to ring them up and ask them out when you're young. Not only did you have to cross that hurdle of the anxiety and then all the awkwardness of asking the girl out, but you had to ring their home, and that meant either their mum or dad, the good chance of them answering. And so you had a gatekeeper there as well, and that throws a whole new level of anxiety. And that is definitely one process I think is gone now.
Yeah, definitely. And you were calling from your own landline as well, which is probably in the kitchen or something like that. So chances were that your mum was cooking there as well. So you had to also do this in front of your mum while having to get through the girl's mum as the gatekeeper as well. So
Exactly, yeah. So the privacy definitely wasn't there as well. So those embarrassing moments, some of them had to be played out, yeah, for all the family to see.
Yeah, different audience there.
And then, of course, you get rejected anyway. So it was all for.
Yeah, exactly.
Now, obviously, dating, I think, is probably going to be one of the biggest challenges growing up. It always is one of the challenges growing up. And today, there's a whole new range of dating. The question I'd like to put to you is, do you think that there is, because, discussing things like having to make that phone call or, doing all things that we needed to do prior to, having this mobile technology. But do you think there's a magic that's been lost in the process, or is there just a new form of magic, romance, to be found amongst those people growing up now that have never known a world without mobile phones or internet? So is there just an equal amount of magic to be found, or do you think that we really have lost some sort of rite of passage magic that came from having to really strive hard to reach out to people when it comes to finding that someone special?
Yeah, I think it's probably a little bit of both, to be honest. I think one thing, just with the way that the world is now, people's attention is getting dragged in all different directions. So I think one positive about, the way that things are at the moment is you have to be more interesting than maybe you had to be back in the day. The range of people that people can interact with is much bigger, so there's obviously much more options out there. There's a lot more things for them to be captivated by. You got Netflix, you got YouTube, you got things on their phone, videos, TikTok, whatever. So I think one positive at least, is that you have to be more interesting as a person now. So I think has added a level of magic to it. But like you said, I think there is something about, having to make that phone call on the landline in front of your mum, talking to the girl's parents, getting rejected in front of your family, like you mentioned. I think there was a real magic to that. Whereas now you can just send a text message. It doesn't really take, you're not really putting yourself out there too much. You don't have to worry about, what words you're going to say, as you're speaking. So I think in that sense, there has been maybe a little bit of magic that's been lost. But like I said, I think the fact that people need to present themselves in more interesting ways, you need to be able to hook people in more. So I think that's added an interesting layer to it as well.
Yeah, I definitely, of course, hope that there's no magic lost. It's again, being an adult, it's easy to think that there might be, and I agree that I suspect there probably is a little bit. But there's so much new magic to be discovered, and it must be difficult and fun at the same time, because it sort of everything's turned up to 11, isn't it? You want to be the funniest or the toughest or the best or whatever it is. Like you've really got to rise above, or at least put yourself out there as in this mass of digital competition. So very interesting times we're living in. But now I understand when it comes to love and romance and those sorts of things, a part of your book description mentions that you might have been in a period where you were forgoing duty of care at a primary school to pursue some forbidden love. So I would love to hear a little bit more about that, because that sounds quite intriguing.
Yeah, so I used to work at a primary school doing before and after school care. This is going back probably about 10 years now. And there was just two of us working there. So there was me, and then there was the coordinator. The coordinator was a girl that I was going to uni with at the time. She was a year or two older than me. She was actually the sister of my sister's boyfriend, and the cousin of a couple of my really close friends as well. So there's this big family where our family was kind of intertwined with theirs. But basically, it was a 3-hour shift in the afternoon. We'd prepare some food, and then we just basically go outside, let the kids play for a bit. We were both in relationships at the time. But we were, like I said, pretty young. I think I might have been 19, 20, maybe 21. And she would have been 22, 23. And just over time, obviously, it's a pretty small space in the cramped kitchen of a after-school care program at a primary school. Pretty intimate. I'm a Libra as well, so I'm a romantic guy. And just over time, we started to get closer, I guess. One day she came to work and mentioned that, her partner wasn't really into her anymore, and they broke up. And that kind of just threw a cat amongst the pigeons for us as a new dynamic. And then, basically, I told her that I was pretty keen on her. I broke up with my girlfriend as well. And we had a bit of it was almost like a Jim and Pam style sort of will they, won't they dynamic going on for a while. But basically during that period, we'd play a game of around the world or cricket or whatever, but basically our attention was just focused on each other. The kids, an axe murderer could have come into the primary school. We would have been none the wiser at the time, I think. So yeah, the duty of care wasn't really there at the time, but it ended up going pear-shaped anyway. So,
okay.
as a lot of young romances do.
Never mind. But well, obviously the excitement and the passion was there in the moment. So, and I think the kids probably had a bit of an idea as well.
Probably. Maybe some of the older ones, the grade 5, 6s, maybe. I'm sure the preppies were probably a little bit, not too aware of what was going on.
Yeah, the old passion in the workplace.
That's it.
Yes.
Another important step, another important mistake.
Yes, I think we will be told over and over again not to, the risks that come with that. And I think it's like touching a hot stove. We've all got a bit burned at some point.
Yeah, exactly. Sometimes you just got to grab what's on there.
When you look back on the joys, the awkwardness, the embarrassment, the fun, all those emotions that come with growing up and making your way to being a man, what would be some elements that you would, if you had to sit down with somebody about to make that journey, so 10-year-old, 11-year-old, about to begin that, what are some of the key points that you think you'd like to, or might have already mentioned in the book, or what sort of words of wisdom and guidance would you give to kids making on their journey towards being a man now? Say, for example, when it comes to starting with romance, what sort of romance tips would you have?
Well, I guess the number one advice I would have would be just to enjoy it. And, you're going to make mistakes along the way. I think a pretty normal reaction to those would be one of shame and embarrassment, trying to hide away from them. But I think, some of those embarrassments are the best stories that you have, and in the moment they feel terrible, but looking back on them, there's something that I know for me personally, I'll look back on a lot of those embarrassing moments really fondly. So I think the number one advice that I would have is just have a sense of humor and humility about yourself, and the experiences that you go through. There's going to be some pretty awkward moments, and like I said, in the moment they're going to feel pretty terrible, but I think just enjoy them, because you will look back and they'll be pretty important stories that you have to tell to your friends and your kids one day down the track. So I think that would be the number one advice that I would give. Yeah.
And like I said, don't let the fear of being embarrassed get in the way, because you know what they say, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So definitely got to charge forward and grab life with both hands. Now, of course, when it comes to love, there's usually another feature that comes with love, or the pursuit of love, or the pursuit of romance, especially when you're younger, because you're usually out and about, you're clubbing or whatever it might be. So as a bloke, sooner or later, you're coming into fight territory. Now, I heard you reveal a little bit of a tale on the interview that I heard that you recorded recently about finding yourself in a bit of a blue, as they call them, due to what was probably stupid behaviour on behalf of a date. So can you tell me, when it comes to fighting, like, is that something that you explore a lot in the book? I mean, obviously it's something that boys do and teenagers do and men do, and some of us just don't grow up and get out of that, and some of us have never thrown a punch or taken a punch in our life, but it's always in the periphery. But just curious as to what sort of role you think fighting plays for a boy's journey to being a man.
Yeah, definitely. So the format of the book is, every chapter is about, a seminal first-time moment in our life. So it might be, our first girlfriend, our first drink, and one of the chapters is actually our first fight, and it does touch on that directly. So the story that you heard me telling on the podcast that I was on recently, that's actually in the book as well. So that was the story of my first fight. I've never actually thrown a punch in my life, but as you can tell from the story that I told and the story in the book, I copped one. There's probably been plenty of times when I maybe deserved a bit of a smack and never copped it. And on this one occasion, I wasn't the one in the wrong and I ended up copping one. So, but yeah, I think fighting is probably, like you said, even if you haven't been in one yourself, it's always on the periphery. And I think particularly at the moment, like, there's a lot of, in the media that you see of just pretty ordinary behaviour involving violence with men. So yeah, I think it is, even if you haven't experienced it yourself, it certainly is, it's on the periphery, like you mentioned, at least. I think everyone's got, some story to tell about a fight, whether they were in it or not. So I think it is a pretty seminal experience in growing up and becoming a man.
Yeah, and like I look back on my high school days, that I remember some of the best friendships I've ever made. It started off as a fight, and you'd have a little bit of a love tap or two, and then you become besties. So it almost seemed like that was that was how you made your good friends, because you'd just be drawn together for a fight for no reason at all. Obviously, it was something important there at lunchtime.
Well, obviously important.
But yeah, no. So and then. But obviously, that's not the case as you get older. Having worked at many bars and nightclubs, I've seen plenty of fights go on, and usually for really stupid reasons, and but usually involving some sort of alcohol. Now, we've talked about a few serious issues, but ultimately, the book, I believe, debuted or reached #1 in the humour section of Amazon. Is that right?
Yeah, it did. So within the first month, it got to #1, yeah, in the adult humour section on Amazon, which is pretty pleasing to see.
That's awesome.
Obviously, for a debut book, you can be a little bit unsure about how it's going to go. I wasn't a prominent writer prior to that. I didn't have a big audience, so it was really pleasing to see that it did so well when it came out.
Yeah, that's magic. And I mean, I know when we started chatting earlier, you mentioned that putting the book, you didn't consider yourself a celebrity, but by the sounds of it, you're a celebrity in the making at the moment. So your journey, you've probably gone from boy to man, and now you're going from man to celebrity, starting with the release of this book. But I'm wondering if you could maybe just let myself and the readers know just a little bit more of an insight about you, Jake, as a person and the life you've led, because I understand you've done quite a bit of travel, and I understand you actually did some writing for travel as well, didn't you?
I did, yes. I did some content writing for a travel company. I was doing a lot of writing a lot of stories from my travels, which kind of started the passion for the writing that led me to this book. A real personal, anecdotal style of writing, I guess. So I did some writing for a travel company, and then I did some advertising work for small companies. They'd come to me with whatever their product was, and I'd write and direct and film and star in just some humor-based advertisement videos for them. And then I got into some just sketch comedy writing for a bit. And
wow.
I started writing the book. So, but like you mentioned, I've done a fair bit of travel. I lived in the UK for 2 years. I traveled all around Europe, done a lot of traveling since then. Obviously, being a young man backpacking around Europe, there's a lot of drinking, a lot of silly behaviour.
I imagine there will be, yes.
I'm 30 now. It's something that I haven't really been able to grow out of. I tend to, after a few beers, do the worm and just do plenty of ridiculous things. So I think, for the readers, or the listeners, if they've read the book, they'll get a pretty clear picture of, I'm a pretty silly man, pretty ridiculous human being. But yeah, like I mentioned earlier, it's always coming from a place of warmth.
And it sounds like comedy obviously has a special place in your life and in what makes you. So, I mean, is it comedy writing or comedy in general something that you're going to pursue a little bit stronger moving forward?
Yeah, I think my writing will probably always be humour-based. Humour's been a big part of my identity forever. I always wanted to be the class clown. I always wanted to make my friends laugh. And similar to the silly behaviour that I was mentioned before, just always looking to make people laugh and entertain them, something that I haven't really grown out of either. So I think it's a huge part of my personal identity. It's something that I love, something that I'm really passionate about. I think that comedy and humour is probably one of the, if not the most interesting thing that we do as human beings. I've got a real passion for it. I love everything that an attempt at being funny says about a person. One thing that I really appreciate about comedy is that, there's not a lot of more visceral, uncomfortable feelings than when you make a joke and it just falls flat. So I love the risk-taking that comes with trying to be funny as well.
Ah, interesting.
But yeah, comedy is a huge part of my writing style. It's what I love to do. I love trying to make people laugh. And I think, one feedback pretty common feedback that I've got from the book is that it was able to make people laugh out loud. So that's probably something that I'm most proud about the book. Over the reaching #1 in the adult humour section. I think the fact that people have actually reached out and said that the book made them laugh out loud, which I think is something that's can be quite difficult to do with the written word. So much of humour is contextual and in the moment, and there's a lot of cues that people probably aren't even aware of that all factor into what's making that person laugh. So I think being able to create that context out of thin air as you're writing it is something that I thoroughly enjoy about writing, and something that I've been really proud that I've been able to do with the book. But yeah, I think going forward, comedy will be a big theme with my writing, whatever writing that I'm doing.
Yeah, well, all the more power to you to be able to write with, you know, a comedic edge, because I can only imagine it must be, from my perspective, it's super difficult because I just don't think I could be funny writing. It's just not something I do. But not only that, I think it's fantastic the way you mentioned how you sort of established the book with each sort of chapter being that first, you know, a momentary first for you, with, you know, in discovering all those things in life. And I think from a reader's perspective, it must be really, well, warm, to use your description. It must be a warm feeling to be able to laugh and enjoy the humour of your moment, but also letting that give them the opportunity to reflect on their first fight, their first kiss, their first whatever it might be.
Yeah, definitely. And along with the, you know, being able to make people laugh out loud, probably the other most prominent feedback that I've got is that the book's been super relatable for people. It's, you know, people have been able to reflect on their own first and, you know, relate to the experiences that I've had. I've had a bunch of people reach out and be like, you know, the exact same thing happened to me. So the first half of every chapter is about what those firsts were like for just men generally. So, you know, the things that might have happened, you know, for that particular first, and just the ridiculous ways that men typically responded to it. And then the second half is always what those firsts were for me. So I think between those two sections of each chapter, generally there's something in there that people will be able to relate to and reflect on their own firsts from that. Yeah,
that's such a cool idea, cool way to do it. And you've probably got a wealth of fun times and memories to draw from. So on your travels and backpacking and whatnot, what would be, off the top of your head, would you say was the funnest place you visited? So somewhere you probably laughed the most, or discovered, or put yourself in the most craziest situations?
Yeah, so most of my backpacking was done solo. So I went over there by myself. A lot of the traveling that I did was by myself. So I always said that the places that you go are only as good as the people you're with. So that was always a big factor in how much I enjoyed a place. My favorite place that I went to was Budapest, actually, which I think
wow.
It was back then. It was maybe a little bit more of a hidden gem. I think now people are pretty aware of how cool it is. But I went there. I stayed at a party hostel. I was only supposed to be there for a couple of nights. Ended up staying for 5 days, but I just had to leave after that because my body was just completely decimated. But that was definitely the funnest place that I went. I met some awesome people there. They have like a different night every night. So they might have like open mic night. They have a pool party one night. They have karaoke night. Yeah, that place was just awesome. I love Spain as well. I went to Madrid, actually split my chin open doing the worm and needed 5 stitches.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a story that's in the book as well. And then 5 days later, I went down to Lagos in Portugal, still had the stitches in my face, and I tried to do the worm again, and then the stitches busted open. I ended up getting an infection, and that was towards the end of my travel, so that's when I knew it was probably time to wrap it up and head to London, because yeah, I probably wouldn't have lasted much longer if I kept going the way I was going.
Oh dear. Well, I think whether it's the worm or when I was growing up, it was the caterpillar, you know, breakdancing.
Yeah.
I remember, you know, nearly breaking my hand or severely spraining my wrist anyway, trying to do this showing off doing the caterpillar. So that was my debut and final of my breakdancing career.
Yeah.
But yes, I can only imagine that doing the worm while intoxicated anywhere is going to be a recipe for potential disaster.
But you would have thought after doing it about 2,000 times, I'd probably be a little bit better at it, but I still managed to find myself injured, you know, pretty regularly. I had a carpet burn on my face the other day from doing it as well. So,
okay. Well, yeah. You might have to sit down, pencil design for a worm outfit, including like a face helmet, so you can go like real extreme worm.
Definitely. I call myself the people's worm because I bleed for the people whenever they demand it. So
there we go. There's a range of t-shirts you need to be getting out within the next 24 hours. The people's worm.
I like that. It's a good business idea.
Yeah, there you go. When it comes to all the traveling, etc., is that something you're going to be pursuing again in the future, or are you settled down there? Because you're based in Melbourne now, aren't you?
Based in Melbourne, yes. Yeah, so I still do traveling, but the traveling that I do now is pretty different. Obviously, I did, you know, I went backpacking for 3 months straight while I was over there. I was working in a school when I was over there too, and over there they have half-term breaks as well. So about every 5 or 6 weeks, you get a week off. over there, so I'd jet off to somewhere else in Europe when I was there as well. These days, it's a little bit less regularly, I suppose, but I still tend to try and do some traveling, once or twice every year, go to a different country that I haven't been to. Obviously, the last couple of years has been a little bit more challenging. I got a trip to Fiji coming up in July, I think, which has been booked in for about 2 years that we haven't been able to get to. So yeah, we got Fiji. I think later this year. My partner's from the UK, so we're going back over there for a wedding for some of our friends as well. So I got a couple of trips lined up for this year, and then I think next year we're talking about maybe going to South America and unleashing the people's worm over there.
Oh, there you go, taking the worm all around the globe.
That's it.
And is travel writing still play a big part for you?
Not particularly, no. So I've more moved into, the book space. Obviously, I've got my day book now. Later this year, I've got a few other things, priorities that I've got to focus on for the next couple of months. But in the back half of this year, I'd like to sit down and start my next project.
Oh, and are you allowed to reveal any hints?
Still very early stages in terms of, what it's going to be about. But I think for those that have read Walk Like a Maniac, you get a pretty good sense for my writing style. And yeah, you'll have a pretty good idea of the type of writing that you can expect.
Well, speaking of Maniac, I've been meaning to ask, when it comes to men and our behaviour in general, and of course that saying behaviour in general is pretty wide net. We've got a whole world of different people. So, but in your head, what would you say is the difference, or what's the defining line between being a man and being a maniac? Because at some point I thought I was going to grow up, but I still don't feel like I've grown up. I still don't feel like a, quote unquote man. And, growing up, I thought the world was full of adults. And of course, when I look now, I'd be more inclined to say at the moment that countries, or should I say, there are many countries being run by maniacs. So what's the difference between a man and a maniac, do you think?
Well, I know for me, it's about 6 beers usually.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah, like you mentioned, I mean, obviously when you're younger, you think that, all these adults are walking around, they've got, a really good idea of what they're doing, and then you become an adult and you realise that no one really knows what they're doing. There's obviously in some facets of our life where we can maybe act like men, but yeah, a lot of the time, particularly after a few beers, there's certainly a lot of maniac behaviour in it. I think even, some of the more sensible people have their moments where, those maniac behaviours start to creep in. And it could be just something as small as just, a silly reaction to something that's happening in their life. You were talking before about the willy snaps, but obviously there's other, stupid things that people do with their phones and just the way that they respond, to situations socially. That maniac behaviour tends to creep in, even with the best of intentions.
And I wonder too, when it comes to, leaderships where people are acting a little bit like a maniac, I wonder if it's, if there's any correlation between being a maniac in a position of power and maybe not having had those formative years as a youth where you just let your hair down and go crazy and make all the stupid mistakes and test boundaries, etc. It'd be interesting to know. That's I have no idea, of course. I'm just spitballing silly ideas, but yeah, you kind of, because at the moment, when it comes to men, we're the ones that can be truly violent. And I always wonder, like, you get in a position of power and what flicks that switch where you become, especially with the way of the world today and the events we're seeing unravel today. So yes, but I can see the other maniac side of things as well, which is just a temporary state of mind for many of us. I guess we can, like you said, have a few bevies or get a bit too excited at the football or wherever it might be, or surfing or wherever it is. So yeah, we could definitely be maniacs.
I think it's good to let it creep in every now and then, have a bit of fun with it too. Can't be serious all the time.
No, that's right. And so what sort of comedic themes would you be looking at your next book, or what are some comedic themes when it comes to life or writing do you have on the back burner that you'd like to attack in the near future?
Well, like I mentioned earlier, the thing that I really love about writing is writing personal stories. I also mentioned about how I like reflecting on the embarrassing moments that I've had to go through. I think that's probably the number one thing that I want people to get out of the book is just the importance of having, a sense of humility and humour about yourself and, the world around you. And I wanted people to read the book and see that not only is it okay for you to laugh at yourself, it's okay for other people to laugh at you sometimes as well. In the end, we're all laughing together. So I think, for my next project, I'll be looking to incorporate some personal stories, some embarrassing stories from my life again. And like I did with Walk Like a Maniac, obviously there's a theme of becoming a man in the modern world and the theme of the seminal first-time moments. I like to generally tie in a bit of a theme with the work that I do. So I think for my next book, you can probably expect something not the same as Walk Like a Maniac. It won't be about becoming a man necessarily, but it'll be some type of theme tied in with it, I think.
Being that the format that you've written Walk Like a Maniac in, and how each sort of section touches on something that's personal to you, is it something you've considered making a live performance as well, like a comedy / spoken word?
I have, yes. So when I was actually living in London, we were all kind of heading back to Australia around a similar time, and as a going away present to the guys, I was going to do a stand-up comedy performance.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, it never ended up eventuating, and then over the years, there's been a couple of times when I was going to do it, and then it's just hasn't eventuated. I've always said that my dream job would be to be a stand-up comedian, but I think it's definitely a bucket list thing, but not looking to pursue it as a career just yet, I don't think.
Well, you can always just dip your toes in the water. How's Melbourne bouncing back with regards to its arts? Then now that all the restrictions are lifting, is there live comedy venues sort of popping back up now, or is it still more focused to the universities? Or
yeah, no, there is. The comedy festival's coming up. I think next month as well. So there's obviously a comedy festival running through. The nightlife's bounced back. Like we were talking off air earlier, I had a few beers last night, so the nightlife's clearly going well for me. But yeah, I think Melbourne's starting to bounce back really well, which is good. And I think music's coming back. There's been a few gigs. The comedy festival's coming up. So I think the art scene's starting to thrive again too, which is good.
Well, who knows? It may be the adventures you have in Melbourne now that everything's opening up again and starting with the comedy festival could just give you a whole lot of fuel to just do a part 2 of
Fingers crossed.
Walk Like a Maniac. Because I said to myself, I don't think I've grown up, but do you think you've become a man, or do you think you're still in that process, or do you think any of us, is it just we're always striving or heading towards a man, but never actually wake up one day and go, I'm a full-grown man? I
think it's just one of those things that you probably never get to that stage, to be honest. It's always kind of a work in progress, I guess. I mean, technically I'm a man, I'm 30 years old, but certainly, a boy in many respects, particularly if you'd ask my partner at times, I'm sure she'd agree with that.
Yeah, and I don't know what the difference is between a boy and man sometimes, but I'm 48, and I still wake up feeling like I'm 16, so I still get excited over a video game or a horror movie or a good surf, or, just the responsibilities are there, sure, but it feels like I'm play acting, pretending, I guess, or playing a role when you step in the adult, again, inverted comma, adult world, as opposed to, I don't feel like I'm a big grown man. I just feel like I'm a teenager, just with different numbers.
Yeah, I think we're all in that same boat, to be honest.
Yeah, which is not a bad position to be in.
No, definitely not. Obviously, if you're, behaving like a full-grown man all the time, life would probably be pretty boring, I'd imagine. So it's good to have those childish moments at times.
Yes, without anyone filming it, though.
Yeah, exactly. Just do it in private, the privacy of your own home.
That's right, yes. And now, so you're going to be working hard on a new book. What about promotion for this current book? Have you got anything special planned, or whether it be Melbourne, any book tours, or more interviews coming up? What sort of avenues are you pursuing to let the world have a nice warm smile and a bit of a giggle and join you in these first moments in life?
Yeah, so I've got a couple of podcasts booked in. Obviously, I've done one a couple of weeks ago. I've got this one in today, and I've got a string of them coming up now. So I'm looking to lock quite a few of those in, get the book out there to a lot of different audiences that probably aren't aware of it. That's the main priority at the moment, I guess. Like I said, I've got a few other things that I've got to focus on outside of the writing as well. At the moment, it's taking up a little bit of my time. But podcast is probably the main avenue at the moment. And then, looking to maybe looking to a book tour, getting the book into the hands of some reviewers as well. And those are probably the next steps from here, I think.
What's, if you don't mind me asking, what's been your relationship to writing? You mentioned you've written a few things before, and obviously you've written for travel. When did you sort of find yourself gravitating to the art of writing?
So it was actually when I came back from living overseas. So I came back, I was unemployed. I had a lot of time on my hands. I had to wait for a few checks and things to come through for work. So I knew someone that was working in travel at the time. They reached out to me to just write some stories for them, which I did. Wrote some stories from my travels. The first story I ever wrote actually is one that's in the book. It's a story about splitting my chin open doing the worm in Madrid on a pub crawl. I got some good feedback from that. And then basically from there, I took over all the content writing for them. And like I mentioned earlier as well, I got into, some advertisement stuff, some freelance videos. And yeah, really just kicked off from there, to be honest. So it's something that I was always good at in school, but I wasn't a great student. I certainly wasn't a super motivated student. So from the early part of my adulthood, wasn't doing much writing at all. But then, yeah, in the last sort of 5 to 6 years, I really got into it, honed my craft, and then that all led up to writing my debut book.
Yep. Well, it's a beautiful craft to be on board, isn't it? Because, I mean, you can take it anywhere you go. So even if whether you have a lot of travel lined up in your future or whether you don't, it doesn't matter. You can, no matter where you are, you can write, which is cool. Which is one of the things I love about writing. But
yeah, definitely.
Can you tell myself and our amazing listeners maybe if you had to pluck, say, I don't know, 1 or 2 borderline embarrassing moments of your period growing up, what would they be? What's something that sometimes wakes you up at night and you don't know whether to laugh or cringe and hide under the covers when you think back?
There's quite a lot of them to choose from, to be honest. It'd be pretty difficult to pinpoint just a couple. But I guess you heard me telling a story about my first fight on the podcast that I was on the other day. That was an embarrassing story. There's obviously what would be a good one to share. When my first drink of alcohol, actually, so I was about 14, so I was pretty young. We used to go to this thing called the Eclipse. It was an underage disco in Melbourne. It was where the who's who of the northern suburbs of Melbourne would meet.
Okay.
And yeah, so me and a group of mates, I was mates with one of them, and it's his group of mates. It was a mate of mine from footy, and he asked me if I wanted to, drink some grog before going to the underage disco. Obviously, being 14 years old, I was like, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. I had to give $10, the $10 buy-in to be a part of it. It got to the night. It was on a Friday night. Obviously, being 14 years old, our parents wouldn't buy the alcohol for us. So it gets to the evening of, empty-handed. So we had to loiter around at the front of just an alcohol shop and just ask passerbys if they'd buy it for us.
Hit the rando.
Eventually, someone said yes. I'm not sure what this stranger was doing buying alcohol for, 6 14-year-old boys. I'm not sure, what type of man this person was. But we ended up buying Red Bears. I'm not sure if you remember Red Bears.
No, not something I'm familiar with.
They were just like a sweet, almost like a UDL type drink. So just sweet, vodka based. But yeah, we got a 6-pack of that shared between about 6 or 7 of us. We're drinking it underneath the train line, which was near where the underage disco was.
Well, it's all about set and setting, isn't it?
It's all about that's right. I was obviously nervous. I'd never drank before. I didn't really know these guys. So I start drinking my, 3/4 of a can that I was able to have. So it's going down, quite palatable. It's tasty. I thought I might actually be a natural or something here. Then all of a sudden I could feel it brewing in my stomach, which originally I thought might have been a sense of pride at how well I was handling the alcohol, but unfortunately that wasn't the case. And I just spewed up all over myself. It's only been in my system for probably about 2 minutes, I reckon. I had the whole can and just vomited everywhere. Like I said, I only knew one of the people there. There was these 5 other guys who seemed to be handling their alcohol pretty well for 14 years old. Obviously, I was pretty nervous and embarrassed, so that was one that took me a little while to get over, actually.
Well, hopefully it meant you didn't jump straight back on the bag and hang out under bridges at 14, talking to random people at the prop line. And what about, when it comes to, I obviously haven't read the book yet, so do you go into any heartbreak territory, like the first time heartbreak happens?
Yeah, so I got the story of my first girlfriend, which was, it's focused around our first kiss, actually. So this was, the early 2000s. I was in year 7, so probably 13 years old. We were the it and potentially only couple of the year 7 at the time.
Oh.
We're coming up to our first sort of unisex party, I guess. and everyone was talking about the fact that our first kiss was going to be at this party. I was terrified. Like, I had no idea how to kiss a human being. I was like one of those people that you would see in TV shows where they have to practice on their hands, trying to study TV shows. I just couldn't wrap my head around the mechanics of it. I was completely nervous. And the first kiss that we had, I actually was just like a platonic kiss. It was like how a mother would kiss their baby. So I just had no idea how to execute like a proper full tongue pash. I had no idea whether tongue was involved or not. But eventually I was able to wrap my head around and execute a proper kiss with a bit of passion in there.
Well, there you go. Practice makes perfect, doesn't it?
That's it.
And so many cool things, like, like I said, those memories of the first party or the first real party where you feel like an adult, and so much fantastic experiences for everyone to have. And I bet it must have been super fun to sit back and reminisce on so many days and relive experiences and just bring that glow of such special memories back while you're writing. So congratulations on the book. Yeah.
It's been good to share it with people as well. Obviously, they're stories that I look back on really fondly. So to be able to share that with, important people in my life, it's been really rewarding and enjoyable as well.
And there's something so honest about comedy or comedic writing or comedy in general, isn't there? It's by incorporating that sense of humor with then kind of the walls break down a little bit, where you can reveal a little bit more about yourself. I think there's something so honest about comedy. Yeah,
definitely. And that's something that I've really strived for, particularly with this book, is just being really raw, honest and unflinching in my observations about myself. I don't shy away from, any of the embarrassment that I've had to go through. I steer into it, in fact, with the book, and that's, something that I really wanted to emphasize and, make a strong point of with my writing is just, like you said, that honesty. If I wanted to make, funny observations about other people in the world around me, I think in order to be able to do that, I needed to, make those observations about myself as well. Otherwise, if I'm just pointing the finger at everybody else, it might come across in a way that I don't want it to come across. Whereas I show that, I'm pointing the finger at myself too, and that ultimately, I'm the butt of the joke. I think it draws people in, and people feel more at ease to be able to laugh about some of the other things that I point out in the book. Yeah, and it's such a relief sometimes when, if you look back in, like, for example, myself, I look back at some absolutely cringe-worthy, embarrassing moments, but then when you discover that it was kind of something that everyone shared at some point or experienced at some point, and it for me, then it makes it easier to laugh at myself, knowing that I was, it was something that happens to us all at some point. And so I think it's a beautiful thing about being honest and brave enough to share those stories. It allows other people to sometimes realize that, I'm not the only one that's had that cringeworthy moment or made that mistake that haunts me. Yeah, definitely. And I think, being able to own that rather than have those, experiences own you is something that's, really vital and, useful for people as well, just in their daily lives, to be able to laugh at yourself and then, share it with others and let them laugh in on it too. I think, like you said, it is a really beautiful thing. And like you said, to own it rather than have it own you, that's, couldn't have put it better myself. That's a fantastic way to put it. And it is important to take some of our regrets and stuff and own them as well, because they're all part of learning. And I think, as we've both probably agreed, there's no one out there that's probably grown up. Everyone's still in that process. So every day is a learning process, isn't it? And so every day we learn, every day we make mistakes, and every day we form new memories. And I don't think there's any adults in the room. We just pretend there are. So, yeah, exactly. Yeah. 100%. But what about, so for all of our listeners out there that would love to sit down and share all these experiences and reflections with you, where can they find your debut book, Walk Like a Maniac, this story of everyone who became a man in the 21st century? So the best place to find it would be on Amazon. I know that's certainly where I get most of my books from. I think that's kind of the way of the world now, just online generally. But Amazon's probably the best place. Like I said, it did get to #1 on their adult humour bestsellers list. So hit up Amazon and get me back to #1. Absolutely. And, what an honour it is to have the opportunity to talk with, I can officially say now, a best-selling author. The pleasure was mine.
Yeah, so no, thank you so much, Jake, for being a part of the Australian Book Lovers podcast. And thank you so much for telling us about the journey that resulted in the book. And look, we can only hope it's the first of many, and it sounds like it will be the first of many. And good chance that if the opportunity comes for me to chat again, you won't be able to say you're not a celebrity. You'll probably be a celebrity by that stage. So remember me when you're a celebrity from this humble moment where I was chatting with you, because I suspect that the sky's the limit for you, and I just wish you all the very best.
No, thank you. I appreciate it. I really enjoyed the chat. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, take care. Enjoy Melbourne, and just be careful when you're doing the worm.
I'll try and remind myself of that. Thank you.
Yeah, but don't stop it. No.
All right, definitely not. I'll keep doing the worm if you bring back the caterpillar.
Yeah, that one could result in some permanent damage.
Yeah, that's what makes it so special, though.
Yeah, true.
Last one.
Well, I'll have to look for a copy of Beatbox, I think it was, or Beat Street. Sorry, the original. The original movie for all that sort of stuff, and I might pick another move and try and incorporate that into my drunk.
I might get my hands on that too and see if I can incorporate the caterpillar in there.
Oh, there'll be plenty of fuel for you there. Absolutely.
Perfect.
The Beatbox. Was it Beat Street? Sorry, yeah. Like it'll be 1984 off the top of my head, but nonetheless. So from you do the worm, I do the caterpillar, and all the very best though for all your ventures forward. Thank you so much for chatting.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
So there you go. Thanks, Jake O'Donnell, for chatting to us about Walk Like a Maniac, and lots of firsts and sharing, your pivotal moments. So, it got me thinking about pivotal moments. What about you?
Well, I definitely brought back memories when we were talking to Jake about, trying to do the breakdancing on the floor. That was definitely a pivotal moment, because it was the first time I ever tried was it the worm or I can't remember what it was, where you jump on the floor sort of chest first.
Oh, yes, yeah.
You're supposed to do the old thing, and I all but, sprained, but pretty came close to breaking my wrist. So, it was a pivotal moment, because that was the first and only time I did breakdancing. So that was the end of that. But yeah, I thought it was a really great opportunity to think back about the process of growing up, we all go through. And it was just interesting to consider that we all share so many experiences growing up, whether they're good, bad, embarrassing, fun, horrible. But at the same time, even though they're like almost a universal experience that we will all experience, for want of a better word, at some point, but we all experience it in our own very unique way. And I think that's such a beautiful thing. Yeah. I mean, everyone's first kiss is very unique to them. For boys, a lot of times the first fight is everyone's going to have a different fight. All those things, and it made me contemplate a while just how much those first experiences shape the way we view the world, and even maybe when we, as a rider, when we're riding, whether those experiences actually, they may not necessarily, like if I'm going to describe a fight, it may not be influenced by my first fight on a conscious level, because the fight is going to happen in the story, so it's the character. However, I wonder how much of the emotion, or some of it, must trickle back from that first part. So almost like I love the idea of first, because I've got this abstract notion of, for example, Jung's archetypes, in the sense that they're, I don't know, I like to think of them like cookie shapes for everything. And
I don't know where you're going with this.
So you've got empty cookie-shaped trays in your head or in your soul, depending on where you think they might sit. But I like to think that when you have that first experience, that is going to be something that all of us go through. So therefore, we have that cookie cut shape in the head. Then that puts the dough in there, and then how we, I guess, allow that to shape who we are is the temperature we bake it at. So sometimes the cookie's perfect, sometimes it's comes out all over fluffy, and sometimes it's all burnt, shriveled. But our experiences, I like to think, are the cookie dough in the cookie shapes in our brain.
I can see where you're going with that. Yeah.
So, but it was a fun thing to look back and think about all the firsts. What about yourself, Veronica? Like when it comes to first experiences, how much do you think the first experiences shaped who you are now, or at least who you've become? And do you think it has an influence on, your archetypes, for want of a better word, when it comes to writing?
Oh, absolutely. I don't think you can really say that your firsts haven't influenced. Mind you, it's a long time ago that some of those school and firsts happen, but there are still firsts. And I think that's something that I do love, is doing new things. I still like to chase shiny new learning and have new experiences all the time. And
you can't stop baking.
Yeah.
There's so many cookies to be made.
And I think it would be disingenuous of authors to suggest that there's not some of them in everything that they write, even if it's fiction. So that their characters, yes, some of them you can see are loosely based on the author themselves, but I think that decisions about the first thing and the way you respond to it very much shapes how you write, who you are, therefore, and how you write. So, yeah, absolutely. And, look, some of the firsts in terms of what you experience at school, whether you're bullied, whether you're supported in your learning, what you get from learning itself and how teachers there and those kind of things. Yeah, I think I'm trying to remember, as you were talking back to my first kiss, and it was a long time ago, but it was I actually don't even think it was particularly a boy that I fancied, but we went out to ice skating, of course, which is in the olden days was at St. Moritz in St Kilda, not there any longer. Got a bus. It was kind of a to the train station. I lived quite a distance from high school, and so I was staying with a friend, and she said, "Oh, this boy likes you, he wants to," and before you knew it, I'm sitting next to him on the bus, and the whole thing happens, and it's just all a bit weird. But there you go. That was a long, long time ago.
And then you get that little piece of paper that says, "Will you go round with me?"
I know you're going together, probably until the next Saturday when you went somewhere else and somebody else likes you,
That's right, yes.
Yeah.
But I like the idea of also, the first time mistakes that have, pivotal repercussions, I suppose. Fun ones. First time you do something ridiculous to maybe impress a girl. Speaking from my perspective, that's something that often you won't forget those in a hurry. So all those little mistakes that are part of the learning process of being, in society and interactions with other people, but also, when it comes to mistakes that maybe are more important that you recognise. So, for example, I think about the first time that I got lost, riding my BMX, and that taught me, I remember the fear, and, I was only a little tack-up, so, didn't know anything about beyond the a couple of big main roads. So when I got lost from being an idiot and exploring, and it was getting dark, I remember, I'll never forget that, and that sort of, taught me big lessons. The first time, for example, caught in a rip or caught in a dangerous situation in the ocean when I was a kid, that's a memory I can, that I've held on to. But that's other. And then for me personally, I can only speak for me when it comes to first and for example, first mistakes. I still think of it as in the cookie. So that first experience of possibly dying, really, if you're caught in a rip in a dangerous ocean. And you're suddenly getting swept, that can end bad. So it is quite an overwhelming situation. If that's the first time and that's how the cookie goes in and it bakes a little bit funny, then that's, I think, the important thing to learn is don't be scared to taste the cookie. Take a bite and then, it actually tastes quite nice, and then you can sort of overcome those fears for next time, because there's obviously a lot of firsts that maybe prevent us from moving forward in different areas too. So yes, the first time of anything is so powerful, and it can have so many repercussions. Can also be an eternal source of smiles and laughter and cringe at 3 a.m. when I think back at the things I've done.
What you mentioned about some of the your first there, I remember the first shift that I went on to the hospital ward. So I've been a nurse for many years, and this was, in the late 70s. So we'd done our training in the nursing school, and then we were bright and shiny with our white aprons and caps and black shoes and stockings and all those kind of things, and rocking up to the ward for the first time and actually, meeting the first people in hospital beds and having this woman say to me, "Tell them not to resuscitate me again." She was so angry.
Wow.
She had chronic obstructive airways disease and she'd had a respiratory arrest, and the hospital had resuscitated her, and she was just so angry because her life was, in her words, she was miserable, and it was not any kind of life. She needed oxygen all the time. She could barely move. She was in a lot of distress, and it just, as a first introduction, she was the first patient that the senior nurse, the second year, took me to meet, and it was just, holy shit, this is life and death.
This is life. This is real.
This is not like it was in the stories or in the lectures that we'd had. It was pretty confronting, and I think that really shaped the way that I nursed and got me to challenge some of the Western medicine and some of the protocols and some of the rules that, and the sort of patronising and infantilizing of older people and all those kind of things, and just thought, right, there are really people in these beds. It's not academic.
Yes, it's a lot of learning to be obtained from being in hospital as a patient, and I'm no doubt as a nurse or doctor too.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, that was amazing. But of course, there are the good things, as you say. I remember the birth of my first child. That was just amazing. And some of you have heard me talk about Cassie, and she's an illustrator and digital artist, as well as a learning facilitator for a law firm. But just having that birth, having been a midwife myself, and then it's very different on the other end when you are, in that really primal experience. And it was amazing and really pivotal. And we talk about sort of pivotal moments, and some of them can be those really big ones like, birth and divorce and marriage and all those kind of things. But I was really interested. I was doing a little bit of research about things that sometimes the pivotal moments are more unique, more individual, such as I mentioned about meeting that first woman, on my first day on the wards. And, we can be so busy with the day-to-day demands and sort of that doing mode that even when a pivotal moment comes, you might not notice it. So I was reading this little article from a gentleman called Harsha Pereira. He's an executive coach in London, so executivecoachinglondon.com. And, he talks about, whether it's sort of being underappreciated by a friend, a boss, or a romantic partner, or whether it's feeling an incongruence between your values and your work. You've got to first notice what is happening in order to make something of it. And he talks then on about, seizing those pivotal moments in life. And then there's kind of this before and after, you remember before and after you did something or that something happened to you. So, pivotal moments. And as you've mentioned, Jake has shared a whole lot of pivotal moments in his book.
Well, I'll share a pivotal moment, which shows that it doesn't always have to be happening when you're young. So it was a first, and it was a pivotal moment. So I guess talking about the book being Growing Up Like a Man, and in brackets IAC, so a maniac. As a younger man, I suppose, it wasn't too long ago, I was working on I did a little bit of work as a boom operator sound for a television show, filmed out in the hinterlands there in Queensland, and we had an episode. The TV show at the time was called Beastmaster, American show based on the very, very corny but cool 80s movie. But there was a day we were shooting where one of the scenes is with the Beastmaster being woken by a tiger, who's actually his friend. And so when we rocked up to set, which was out in the sort of rainforest area there, and I was setting up this big cage. And I said, is that for the tiger? Because I knew we were getting a tiger. And one of the guys, I guess it was assistant director or whatever, said, "Oh no, that's for the crew." And I thought he was joking, but he wasn't. So we all had to stand in this cage, and then they set up the camera, and then the two tiger handlers came out and had rifles, and they said, okay, everyone do not move, everyone quiet, tiger coming on set. So out comes this big tiger on this huge chain, but it's a really long chain. And then let the tiger sniff, let it settle down. And from, standing in the cage, suddenly I was like, oh, this is bizarre. Now I'm the zoo animal. But then they had one operator on a camera, and then they wanted sound. So my boss at the time said, are you scared of cats? And I was like, no, not at all. This is an idiot guy being bravado at stupid times. So no, I love cats, which I do. And he's like, okay, well, here you go. So then they got me out of the cage, and I got given a whole heap of instructions from the handler, what to do, what not to do, what to do if anything happens. And they had, I assume, tranquilizer guns and possibly bullets, whatever they need. So that was the situation. So I had to stand behind the camera operator and hold the boom out so we could pick up the sound of the tiger going to this, who was a stunt actor at that point. Now, as I was standing there, the trainer walked the tiger past me. And it was at that point that I realised, A, I'd made a mistake. B, there was about 2 meters slack of chain, and I was probably 3 meters of slack chain, and the tiger was like literally 1 meter away from me. So it could have just jumped and pounced. And it was the first time ever that I realised I was just a snack, and that felt really weird. I was a snack for another animal, and the embarrassing part was my leg wouldn't stop shaking. There was nothing I could do to stop my leg shaking. It was absolutely a pivotal moment when I just realised, it's not an animal I'm going to come in contact with in the wild here in Australia, but I guess it was that first time when I realised that we could easily be eaten. We are just a source of protein for another animal. And, talk about respect for nature. It went up on the Richter scale that day, and I'm sure there was a bit of laughter too at my shaking leg. And but yeah, so there you go. You get yourself into the strangest situations sometimes, with a little bit of false bravado, and so that was a pivotal moment. My respect for animals and nature takes on a whole new meaning now. My understanding of the food chain is definitely a little bit sharper. And of course, for me, it was both exciting, pivotal, and embarrassing all in one. So there you go.
Thank you for sharing that.
Oh, there's plenty more, but that's for our R-rated episode.
We do have to keep the episode rolling along. And so I think we might be up to quotes.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, what inspired your quotes today?
Well, the word pivotal and experiences. And I thought, that's kind of, very much what I love. And, when I'm doing my coaching, always getting people to think about those pivotal moments in your life or your day. And so this is a quote from author Elizabeth Norris. So Elizabeth is I think she's an American author. Now, lives are made of strings of moments. And every once in a while, one of those moments is pivotal and defining. It changes everything, alters you so completely that when you look back, there's a clear before and after.
I like that visualization.
Yeah.
Little knots along the way that represent pivotal moments.
Yeah, little string. And so you can say there's a before the tiger life and there's an after the tiger life.
Oh, yes. Yes.
And I often say to my kids, BC, before children, after children, it certainly changes you.
Yeah. And of course, there is the string theory to the universe itself. So I love it.
We should get some of our sci-fi authors on to talk about string theory. But anyway, there you go.
And simulation theory,
your one of your quotes.
Well, I looked into a couple of quotes to basically around the idea of growing up in this life, and so I've got two. One's a little bit somber, so I'll start with that one because I want to finish on a little bit of a fun. So the first quote reads as follows: "We are all alone, born alone, die alone, and in spite of true romance magazines, we shall all someday look back on our lives and see that, in spite of our company, we were alone the whole way."
There you go.
I do not say lonely, at least not all the time, but essentially and finally alone. This is what makes your self-respect so important. And I don't see how you can respect yourself if you must look in the hearts and minds of others for your happiness. Of course, the author there is none other than Hunter S. Thompson. And that's from The Proud Highway Saga of a Desperate Southern Gentleman.
Right.
yes, a little bit somber, a
Yeah.
little bit existential.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure I agree with it 100%, but it is definitely something that makes you think.
Well, that's it. Even if you think about the aloneness, some of the best moments in your life are still your interactions with others and your interactions with the world.
Yes, and the idea that you can, in that with the quote saying that self-respect's so important and you can't respect yourself if you look into the hearts and minds of others for your happiness. But I'm not sure, it's an interesting quote. I'm not sure if I agree with it, because in my alone time, the person who is in that alone time has been shaped and molded by the people around me and the experiences and the emotions that I've shared. So, when you're alone, you're never truly alone, because you've always carrying with you.
Yeah, as you
the
mentioned
experience
earlier,
of others.
brought your history with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but interesting. Obviously, a prolific and controversial author, Mr. Hunter S. Thompson, but always has something to say that makes you think. So, yes,
There you go. All right, so I'm going to give you one from a slightly different author this time. Not that all my quotes have to be authors, but this is by author Robert D. Kaplan. And when I looked him up, he's in fact an American author who writes about politics, foreign affairs and travel. He's the neo-realism school, just in case you're interested, while we're talking about more existential things. His quote is, "You don't grow up gradually. You grow up in short bursts at pivotal moments by suddenly realising how ignorant and immature you are."
That's the curious one.
I thought, okay, that's a way to look at it.
The second part I agree. I'm constantly aware of my ignorance and stupidity. That's 100%.
But yeah, growing up in short bursts at pivotal moments.
But I think I do get that. I think that's pretty close to the truth too.
If you're
because
prepared
the
to
moments
jump
can come
in.
thick and fast.
Sorry?
The moments can come thick and fast,
yeah.
and so they can, and be pivotal. And like you said, from the second that a pivotal moment is over, you're a different person,
Yeah.
or at least in theory, you've gained wisdom, you've gained experience.
If you're
and
prepared
it's,
to look at it,
shaped
you can let it go, and then it happen over and over again, like the universe going, let me just bash you on the head one more time with the idea that you need to do something, or get out of where you are, or find your way. So there you go.
Yeah.
Give us yours.
Okay, so this quote is from author called Cassandra Clare, and it comes from a book called City of Ashes.
Oh, yeah. Mortal Instruments,
so-
Read that one.
So, I don't want to be a man, said Jace. I want to be an angst-ridden teenager who can't confront his own inner demons and takes it out verbally on other people instead. Well, said Luke, you're doing a fantastic job.
There you go.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yes, Cassandra Clare.
Yes, very good. Yeah.
And I don't want to be a man.
No, adulting is really hard. Can I just say that? Some days it's easier than others, but at the moment, adulting is very hard.
Yeah, but that's that word, isn't it? Adult or man. It's a definition that can't be written because there is no defining description. Because I don't wake up. At no point have I woken up and felt like an adult. I've sometimes felt the weight of the world.
Yeah.
And and possibly had to face many things like yourself. But still, it doesn't make me feel like an adult. It makes me maybe feel closer to the universe, with the wisdom that's been given. But still, I mean, I can't pretend to be an adult, and I definitely, as a man, I suppose I could be macho. But then, if anyone saw me this morning walking Bobby on his harness at the park,
Bobby the cat.
yes, suddenly that notion of a macho man goes out the window. But so there we go. What were you thinking of? Oh, I've got a thought for the tagline, but did you have a thought?
No, you are the expert at the taglines. I am the expert at reminding people that if you are a reader and you'd like to receive our semi-regular newsletter full of excellent Aussie authored books and always a giveaway, then jump onto the website australianbooklovers.com/booklovers and subscribe. Now, we are not going to spam you because as you may know, we're pretty much volunteer at the moment. So when I can get around to it, and when I get a free book to give away, we will send you a newsletter. And for authors, as Darren mentioned earlier, jump onto the Book Lovers website for authors and load up your book so that we can share it with our listeners and talk about it. Now, if you are listening on the podcast, you obviously know where to find us. We're on all good podcasting platforms. But for social media, we're also on Twitter at Australian Books. We're on Facebook and Instagram at Australian Book Lovers. And we're also on places like LinkedIn and YouTube. So there you go. Tagline, and just hit me with your idea.
Well, yes, I will hit with the idea because I think it's a fun one. But before that, I just wanted to let our listeners know that next episode, we have a really cool guest, author Tanya Heaslip, who is the author of An Alice Girl, Beyond Alice, and Alice to Prague. And fascinating chat. She, absolutely fascinating. From a cattle station to, going overseas and obviously to Prague and helping them shape democratic law.
Yeah, fantastic.
Now, if that's not an interesting just beginning, we'll not mention everything else, very fascinating, super fun chat, just amazing. So, yes, Tanya Heaslip, next episode, can't wait.
Very good. And now, of course, we'll have a book review after this. So even though we hang up or we give you the tagline, doesn't mean that the episode is over.
No, there's always a little bit of bonus magic at the end. Yeah. But when it comes to the tagline, with respect to Jake O'Donnell's book and those experiences he had backpacking and whatnot, I thought, what about if we're like backpackers at a rave, like at a doof and calling out to the DJ, read. And listeners, I was a heavy metal guy, so you never would have seen me with glow-in-the-dark sticks doof-doofing at any point.
Well,
so
I was born up in the era of disco,
disco,
so you definitely wouldn't have seen me there.
Well, disco is still the same, calling out to the DJ, only, probably different drugs back then, that's all.
And bush music. Clothes. I did like bush music, actually. It's like...
Oh, okay.
I'll imagine that.
Well, okay, well, imagine bush music, but with pulsing lights and glow-in-the-dark sticks and wire people in pyjamas in a nightclub, that sort of stuff.
Okay, with you.
Okay. All right, so... Did you want to lead me in?
Yeah. Are you ready? So, readers and listeners, take care for now and remember to...
Read!
More! Aussie!
Books! Yeah! So, you can't see it, but I'm like, I'm grooving in the chair. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us for episode 53. Can't wait to share with you episode 54. And thank you for supporting the podcast. Hope you enjoy looking through all the wonderful Australian authored books on the website. There's so many there. It's growing every day. Let's bring it to the world. In the meantime, take care.
Take care and bye for now. One Summer in Santorini, Holiday Romance Book 1 by Sandy Barker is a light and sunny read on the surface, romance, travel and food in equal parts. But there's more to One Summer in Santorini than that. Barker has a sharp and excellent eye for characters and description. She throws us into the deep end and into close quarters with an eclectic group of travellers sailing the Greek Isles. There's tension, undercurrents, bad behaviour and lots of flirting. Our main protagonist, Sarah, keeps us informed with her internal chatter that feels very real and refreshingly Australian. And while she starts out on a holiday to forget her nasty ex, Sarah discovers a great deal more about herself as she unwinds and gets up close and personal with her sailing family. Tears, tantrums, laughter and love. A great combination.
Let's meet again. When magic happens.
Australian Book Lovers acknowledges First Nations peoples and recognises their continuous connection to country, community and to culture. We pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging, and honour the sharing of traditional stories passed down through generations. We're committed to a safe and inclusive welcome for authors and readers of all cultures and backgrounds, including people of LGBTQIA+ communities and their families.